faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today's book we're exploring is the masterpiece by Nobel Literature Prize winner Naipaul, A House for Mr. Biswas. Published over half a century ago in 1961, its core theme, home, still resonates deeply today. A house isn't just shelter from storms. It carries profound meaning. For us, it might mean marriage, household registration, or symbolizing belonging in a city. But for the protagonist, Mr. Biswas, his house quest defined his short, tear-filled life. The house stood as supreme proof of his independent identity and dignity. In essence, the house drives the novel's plot, while identity pursuit forms its hidden backbone. To grasp this, we must examine author Naipaul's life. Born in 1932 to Indian Brahmin immigrants in Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad is an isolated Caribbean island nation, smaller than 1/10 of Shanghai. Former Spanish colony until 1797 when British forces captured it, later bringing Indian and African laborers, including Naipaul's ancestors. Thus, Naipaul's forebears arrived as indentured workers from India. He devoured English literature young, deciding at 11 to become a writer in England. Later, Naipaul achieved his Oxford dream and became an author. Creating 30-plus works, he won the Booker and Nobel Prizes and was knighted by the Queen. Though achieving his dream, he forever felt rootless in Trinidad, India, or England until his 2018 passing. In England, displacement and near destitution from poverty and discrimination plagued him. He once attempted gas suicide that failed only due to insufficient gas. Amid this identity struggle, house longing became Naipaul's own unresolved complex. Naipaul once claimed that among all his works, A House for Mr. Biswas is the one closest to him, and critics regard this novel as Naipaul's most personal. It's hailed as his most successful novel, ranked among Britain's top 100 novels of the 20th century. With nearly 500,000 words, Naipaul portrays Mr. Biswas's ordinary, busy, bitter, and sorrowful life on an epic scale, blending family biography with immigrant epic style. The novel begins by stating that 10 weeks before his death, Mr. Biswas was fired. Mr. Biswas was 46, a father of 4 children. He had no money, and his wife Shama had no money either. For the house on 2nd Street, Mr. Biswas was burdened with a $3,000 debt, which he had carried for 4 years. This passage succinctly outlines Mr. Biswas's identity and situation. The narrator is omniscient, using 3 tenses to summarize the character's past, present, and final fate, inevitably evoking the classic opening of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, another Nobel laureate. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. However, chronologically, A House for Mr. Biswas was published earlier in 1961, while 100 Years of Solitude came later in 1967. We cannot know for sure. Did Marquez ever read this novel? But regardless, Naipaul's narrative technique in this novel is self-evident. The protagonist, Mr. Biswas, is a news editor at the Port of Spain Gazette in Trinidad's capital. His lifelong dream is to own his own house. Why? Like author Naipaul, Mr. Biswas is an Indian immigrant. Though he belongs to the Brahmin caste, the aristocratic class, he was born into poverty and lived in his wife's Tulsi family house after marriage. He once tried to build a wooden house himself, but ultimately failed. In the final days of his life, he finally owned his own house, but it saddled him with heavy debt. The new house was an obvious shoddy construction. For example, the stairs were added later with poor quality tin, the floor is sinking, and most windows won't close, among other issues. But at this point, Mr. Biswas was still very satisfied. For him, this was a completely delightful, brand new, and whole world. He could hardly believe he would own such a world, feeling joy, surprise, and disbelief. He examined every item in the room, imbuing them with extraordinary meaning. Mr. Biswas cherished and enjoyed this house as much as he despised and despair over his previous life of dependence. The novel begins its narration from the start. Mr. Biswas's lifelong struggle for a house. For easier storytelling, we divide it at his marriage into the Tulsi family and joining the Guardian. Using his work as a journalist as a boundary, his life is divided into 3 stages. The first stage is Mr. Biswas's childhood and youth. In depicting this, Naipaul's writing has a Latin American magical realism touch. Mr. Biswas was born in Trinidad, in a rural community rich with Indian customs and religious beliefs. His birth was filled with ill omens: breech birth, born at midnight, and with 6 fingers. So his grandparents summoned a Brahmin scholar, Pandit, for divination. Pandit prophesied that Mr. Biswas would grow into a womanizer, a liar, a spendthrift, even bringing harm to his parents, especially his sneezes, which would kill his father. To prevent misfortune, Pandit decreed that Mr. Biswas must not see his father for 21 days after birth, and he must never go near rivers. Oh! The terrified family strictly followed Pandit's instructions. Later, Mr. Biswas's 6th finger fell off when he was 9 days old and was buried with his umbilical cord behind his grandparents' house. At 21 days, his father finally saw him through a copper plate smeared with coconut oil. Oh, but Pandit's prophecies still came true one by one. Mr. Biswas's sneezes constantly brought bad luck to his father, like losing 3 cents while shopping, breaking a bottle, spilling a dish, and so on. Whenever he sneezed, his father would stay home, afraid to go out. Once, his father had already stepped out of the house when he suddenly heard his son sneeze. He still went to work on the plantation and ended up with a severe leg injury. This made his father both angry and fearful of his troublesome son.
However, worse was yet to come. Mr. Biswas violated the ban, sneaked to the water to play, and accidentally caused a neighbor's calf to drown.
In the pond, he hid in terror. When everyone searched but couldn't find him, they assumed he'd fallen in. His father went into the pond looking for him and tragically drowned. His father's death left the Biswas family without support. They suffered constant bullying in the village until his mother finally sold their house and land to neighbors, moving to nearby Bogdis town to live with her sister Tara. This move was Mr. Biswas's first major life turning point, and when he first realized a house's crucial importance. As an immigrant, losing his home carried even deeper symbolic meaning for Mr. Biswas. The novel writes, Mr. Biswas left the only house where he had any rights. For the next 35 years, he wandered like a nomad without a place to call home. If Mr. Biswas's magical birth represents Indian immigrants' discomfort, alienation, and subtle resistance, then leaving his birthplace symbolizes his further detachment from cultural roots. And at Aunt Matara's, Mr. Biswas attended missionary school studying Western curriculum and British literature, colonial education. His math was poor. He couldn't grasp 0 times 2. After 6 years, his greatest achievement was mastering beautiful block letter handwriting. In his essay collection, A Writer's People, Naipaul wrote, "As colonials, we didn't forget or try to forget our origins. Quite the opposite. That India we came from was unforgettable, permeating our lives. In religious rituals, festivals, much of our sacred traditions, even our social concepts, India's shadow was everywhere." Naipaul often recalled childhood Indian rituals, but scattered families and declining ancient clans in diaspora caused this civilization to fade.
Though Mr. Biswas's Brahmin status still mattered at Aunt Matara's, he was insignificant daily, but in special rituals, as Brahmin, he received high caste honors.
He'd feast heartily that day, but once the ritual ended, he'd take his payment and leave, reverting to his laborer descendant status. Living in a mud hut with his penniless mother. Also, given his Brahmin status, his aunt arranged for him to study with Pandit Jairam, hoping he'd become a scholar. Yet Mr. Biswas showed no interest in Hindi or scriptures and was brutally expelled for accidentally defiling a sacred tree. This expulsion marked Mr. Biswas's second life turning point. His identity awareness awakened. He craved independent space and a house. Later, humiliation, slander, and beatings at a hotel job became unbearable. He confronted his mother.
Why do you keep sending me away to others? Why does everyone treat me however they want?
Getting no reply, he vowed fiercely, "I'll work hard."
One day I'll have my own house. I won't return to Auntie's.
Entering adulthood, his second life stage, he married and found sign painting work through friends, leveraging his block letter skills. This job led him to the wealthy Tulsi family where he met his future wife. The novel notes, he began waiting not just for love, but for the world to offer sweetness and romance. At 17, fate bound him to the Tulsi clan for nearly 30 subsequent years. But reality shattered these beautiful illusions. Mr. Biswas later realized the marriage was a trap he'd walked into. His entry into the Tulsi family. His acceptance stemmed partly from his Brahmin caste, Indian immigrant status. This is Tulsi declared. "We don't care about your job or wealth. Lineage matters most." For them, a daughter's marital happiness meant less than gaining a live-in son-in-law as free labor. Unlike the Biswas family, the Tulsis were a prominent Trinidad clan with multiple properties, including the Hanuman House. The Tulsi family had many members. Couples didn't separate after marriage. The mansion housed 200 people, maintaining strict hierarchy with Mrs. Tulsi as supreme ruler, forming a matriarchal survival network. Under Uncle Seth's supervision, sons-in-law worked at family construction sites, ranches, and shops. Their names forgotten, they were known only as Tulsi sons-in-laws, essentially laborers, becoming live-in husbands. Lost in this vast Tulsi plan, Mr. Biswas and his wife Shama lived in a long, narrow room, partitioned from a balcony. And he was blamed for his poverty. Everyone said,
When you came to this family, your possessions couldn't even fill an inch of a nail.
Everyone felt he should be grateful to the Tulsi family. Mr. Biswas had no rights at home. The Tulsis named his children, and he couldn't even buy his child a unique toy. Due to sister's jealousy, his wife Shama had to smash the expensive dollhouse he bought their daughter. The Tulsi family always arranged his life. First as small shopkeeper, then sugarcane plantation foreman. In the crowded, noisy mansion, Mr. Biswas was insignificant. He had neither personal space nor family privacy, let alone identity recognition or respect. In the Tulsi household, poor and weak Mr. Biswas, no one cared about his feelings, dignity, or existence. No one noticed him coming or going. Mr. Biswas once sought allies among similarly oppressed sons-in-law, but one betrayed him by revealing secret nicknames he'd given family members.
For example, he called Mrs. Tulsi a cow and her young sons monkeys, greatly angering her.
Thus, Mr. Biswas was deemed troublesome, disloyal, untrustworthy, becoming everyone's target. To resist the constant feeling of being swallowed whole, Mr. Biswas often clashed with family. But each conflict ended in his defeat. His desire to escape intensified, to break free from this clan's control, find his own footing. Thus, building his own house became his life's purpose. For this dream, he moved his family repeatedly, endlessly fantasizing about owning his own house. The first move was arranged by the Tulsi family to Hunter's Village to run a shop, his first relatively independent dwelling. But how desolate and terrifying this shop was! The house was low, narrow, with rusty tin roof, grimy floors and walls slanting, sinking, loose. Mr. Biswas lived here 6 years, yet he never considered it home, only a temporary pause. Ultimately, poor management led to losses, forcing him to abandon the shop.
The second move was also Tulsi arranged. Mr. Biswas became overseer at Greenvale Estate, living in mud and dung-filled barracks, unacceptable to him and his wife. The barracks.
They decided to save and build their own house, a real one with mortise and tenon wooden walls and tall concrete pillars. He envisioned a beautiful home. He saved relentlessly, spending over $100, only to build a dilapidated, uninhabitable shack. The old tin roof oozed snake-like black tar, yet Mr. Biswas treasured it. Daily inspections, constant fear of sabotage, paranoia grew to delusions, panic attacks, nightmares, near breakdown. One tragic night, a merciless storm destroyed both house and dream. He fell gravely ill because of it. For Mr. Biswas, a house wasn't just shelter. It was life's foundation, a symbol of identity, status, dignity, independence. Owning one became an inescapable obsession. Yet Mr. Biswas realized his resistance had failed. After Greenvale's collapse, Mr. Biswas, 31, father of 4, remained jobless and disregarded by the Tulsis, just like at 17. Tormented by worry and despair, after a family quarrel, he walked out alone, entering the third phase of his lifelong house struggle. After arriving in Port of Spain, he would spend his final 15 years on Sikkim Street. At this stage, Mr. Biswas finally secured a decent reporter job, but his housing journey remained fraught with twists. In Port of Spain, Mr. Biswas leveraged his sign painting skills and reading knowledge to join the Trinidad Guardian as a reporter, an ideal position indeed. He quickly brought his wife Shama and 4 children, a family of 6, to Port of Spain, yet still lived in Tulsi-owned property without their own house. With journalism success boosting his confidence, he enthusiastically renovated, abandoning gardens, planting roses, digging lotus ponds, and buying furniture. However, good times didn't last. The Tulsi family grew daily while their finances dwindled. Soon, they abandoned Hanuman House and crowded into the Port of Spain property. Mr. Biswas's solitary dream shattered. His garden was utterly ruined.
Then World War II impact worsened things. Financially strained, Mrs. Tulsi moved everyone to suburban Short Hills, selling shops and renting out the city house.
Thus, the Biswas family lost their space again, plunged back into Tulsi household chaos and quarrels.
After another family clash, Mr. Biswas found land in Short Hills and built a house similar to Greenvale's.
Tragically, it burned down.
Mr. Biswas returned to the Port of Spain house with the family, tensions escalating after he offended Mrs. Tulsi's youngest son.
Alwad, conflicts intensified as housing dreams kept crumbling. Professionally, Mr. Biswas also declined. New editors rejected his articles. Wartime shortages made his salary increasingly inadequate for family expenses. Ironically, he was appointed investigator for the Guardian's Poor Relief Fund, while urgently needing relief himself. As Shama said, the prime candidate for relief, Mr. Biswas, now a Poor Relief Fund investigator, felt he couldn't stay with the Tulsis any longer.
He desperately searched everywhere for a house, preparing to take a loan.
Then, a solicitor named Monsieur voluntarily offered him a house at low cost. Eager for ownership, Mr. Biswas spent his life savings plus a $3,000 loan without hesitation. But when moving in with his family of 6, he discovered the house's shoddy quality. Though imperfect, he finally owned his own house. During illness and despair in his final months, the novel notes he repeatedly marveled at living in his own home. Since childhood, he'd moved from one stranger's house to another. Constantly criticized since youth, now, doors and windows shut, he heard only his household. He moved freely through rooms and yard.
So Mr. Biswas finally had his house, though burdened by heavy debt.
To repay loans, he overworked relentlessly, dying suddenly of a heart attack. In this still mortgaged house, the novel ends with Mr. Biswas's funeral. Afterwards, Shama and children return to the empty home. So, Mr. Biswas's story concludes. An immigrant's epic with cool precision, Naipaul wrote an immigrant's tragicomedy pursuing dignity and identity. As written, when moving, Shama, leaving her mother and sisters, developed new loyalty to Mr. Biswas and children. This was as monumental a victory as owning the house. The Sikkim Street house gave him true belonging, but tragically, he died young before enjoying this freedom. Naipaul said this novel sprang from his childhood observations and feelings. For Mr. Biswas was modeled after Naipaul's own father.
Even Trinidad's town names and characters in the novel were real.
British Naipaul scholar Bruce King called this book an autobiography of father-son relationships and mutual growth. This novel is an epic of Trinidadian Asians and Indians. In reality, Naipaul's father, like Mr. Biswas, worked for a newspaper. He died in 1953 like Mr. Biswas of heart disease. Mr. Biswas, like his father, was a double exile from both Trinidadian and Indian cultures. He spent his life confirming his status, asserting his Brahmin identity while proving he wasn't just laborer. He sought house, work, space, status, dignity. Mr. Biswas's fate mirrors colonial immigrants' identity struggles more than just old Naipaul's life. Beyond house, another key word is Mr., an obvious status marker. Throughout, even unborn in his mother's womb, Naipaul calls him Mr. First mentioned before death. 10 weeks before he died, Mr. Biswas was dismissed. Second mention pre-birth, shortly before his birth, Mr. Bibas, his mother Bibi, and father Raghu quarreled again. Mr. is an honorific. Both his desperate cover for poverty and Naipaul's narrative framing of him, this framing blends compassion with irony. Did Mr. Biswas earn external respect? Reality crushed his dignity-seeking efforts. Constantly humiliated, suppressed, his identity pursuits shattered repeatedly. He remained marginalized, an outsider, manipulated, discriminated against, oppressed throughout the novel. Unlike other literary outsiders, amid poverty and rootlessness, he clung to one dream, an independent house embodying identity and dignity. This belief defined his life. Mr. Biswas's history is his house struggle chronicle. Meanwhile, Naipaul mercilessly reveals Mr. Biswas's weaknesses. He constantly complains and blames others, repeatedly venting to his wife Shama about the Tulsi family, giving everyone nicknames and even baseless insults. Shama feels that it's Shama who hasn't allowed him to live a good life. He has lofty ambitions but lacks practical skills. He completely failed at running the shop in Hunter's Village and also couldn't manage laborers effectively at Green Vale. He is complacent and compromising. During his 6 years in Hunter's Village, he maintained a transitional mindset. As scholar Tanyanzo said, he lived in a state of temporariness. He always felt reality wasn't worth changing through effort, and that real life would soon begin elsewhere. This compromise actually stems from Naipaul's perspective. The concern about Indian community belonging is shown when the Tulsi family moves from Trinidad to Port of Spain, revealing the collective decline of Indian immigrants. In Trinidad, Indian immigrant society is fragmented, divided by religion, ethnicity, and caste, with a lack of unity among groups. It's even harder to integrate with other local ethnic groups. This is particularly prominent in places like Trinidad, where Indian immigrants form a large majority. In the first half of the 20th century, Trinidad, the struggles of Indian immigrants in foreign lands are filled with confusion and helplessness. The efforts and experiences of West Indian indentured laborers and their descendants, like Mr. Biswas, and their pursuit of a house they can freely control and feel ownership over, are a microcosm of this arduous journey. So, the Tulsi family, as Mr. Biswas's counterpart, actually faces the same crisis of identity and belonging.
The name Hanuman House comes from the hero in the Ramayana, deeply revered by Indian people.
What unfolds here is the common scenario and inevitable outcome of Indian extended family life.
The family provides protection and belonging, preventing people from feeling emptiness. But this house is also like a small nation, populous, indifferent, hierarchical, full of conflicts, fights, hatred, breakups, reconciliations, and moral accusations. Superficially, Hanuman's members keep increasing. But in reality, besieged internally and externally and self-isolated, its ultimate fate, like the Biswas families, is marginalization and disintegration. The decline of the Tulsi family has obvious symbolic meaning. It represents the backward and decaying traditional Indian society. And where do these backwardness and decay originate? First, Naipaul directs his critical pen toward the colonizers. Naipaul himself descended from Indian Brahmin nobility, yet lived in backward colonial Trinidad. In India, he was seen as Trinidadian, unable to find his ethnic roots. In London, England, he was a discriminated Indian struggling to survive. Torn between these three cultures, Naipaul endured prolonged anguish in his identity quest, all rooted in colonial history. Both Trinidad and India were British colonies. Though gaining independence last century, they couldn't escape colonial power's judgment. As third world nations, their judged status couldn't evade civilization's shattered continuity. Naipaul critiqued not just colonialism but third world nations even more ruthlessly. In his masterpiece, A Bend in the River, corrupt politicians and independent African nations made life worse than under colonial rule. In what Naipaul called half-made societies, like Trinidad, Indian immigrants talked of returning home but never acted, too lazy to change or create. They didn't speak English and had no interest in their adopted land. A place meant to be temporary yet became permanent. Ironically, they constantly discussed returning to India. But when return opportunities arose, many refused, fearing unfamiliar environments and leaving their familiar temporary homes. Uprooted from native soil and houses, their Indian identity meant nothing in Trinidad. Yet, Mr. Biswas's wife, mother, and grandfather all echoed, "Fate, we cannot change fate." In A House for Mr. Biswas, Naipaul also depicts Trinidad's squalor, chaos, criminals, solicitors, clerks, lawyers, teachers, journalists, even drunkards, wife-beaters, and corrupt officials.
At the newspaper, Mr. Biswas wrote the column, "I am Trinidad's most wicked man," interviewing society's marginalized figures.
Thieves, beggars, night soil removers, morticians, asylum guards, one-armed men, the lame, etc. In Naipaul's writing, we clearly see his negative view of the third world. He once stated publicly, "My novels aren't for Trinidadians or Indians. They don't understand literature." In his India trilogy, he wrote, "India is a defeated country. Its only hope lies in more rapid decay." Regarding Trinidad, he similarly saw it as a small place with thoroughly distorted values where everyone lives humbly. Though classified post-colonial, Naipaul never altered his stance to meet colonial writer expectations. His critique targeted not just colonialism, but even more intensely fell upon colonized peoples themselves. Early works depicted Trinidad's chaotic ugliness. Later, his India trilogy dissected India's poverty, noise, and blindness. Critique blended with deep exploration. He argued, post-independence India meant more than British departure. It required true independence from government and people. As dual-cultural immigrant, Naipaul belonged nowhere, echoing Adorno. For those with no homeland, writing becomes dwelling. At his 2001 Nobel ceremony, the Swedish Academy praised, "He merges perceptive narrative with fearless exploration to uncover truth in distorted history." Reading Naipaul examines not just colonial minds but modern cultural dilemmas. Mr. Biswas's quest mirrors Naipaul's own identity search. A search. For them, immigrant struggles intensify the need to grasp physical foundations, to settle, protect, and prove oneself. This is a survival dilemma every one of us faces. Even if not colonized, we're haunted by rootlessness. We trek the long road seeking identity and dignity, staking everything for that certainty of space and proof of self. Undoubtedly, humanity shares a fundamental consistency in life's struggles. Colonized people aren't aliens from another world. Their pain isn't distant from us. Like Naipaul, like us in peaceful worlds, striving in unfamiliar cities, unaccepted, this quest for life and dignity remains humanity's eternal identity question. All right, that concludes our reading of A House for Mr. Biswas. Reading notes are below the audio. We'll see you tomorrow.